something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Some of the most horrific true crime stories come from serial killers, criminals, rapists, arsonists, but there are some crimes with behavior so bizarre, so unsettling, that they could prevent you from sleeping ever again. The Girl Scout murders. In the summer of 1977, 3 young Girl Scouts staying at an Oklahoma campsite were raped and murdered. The girls, Lori, Michelle, and Doris, were between the ages of 8 and 10. About 2 months before the murders, a camp counselor found a disturbing note in her belongings. The culprit promised to murder 3 children at the camp. Knowing that young campers enjoy telling scary stories around the campfire, the camp counselor dismissed the threatening note as nothing more than a prank, a decision she would come to regret. Early in the morning of June 13th, the girls' bodies were found in their sleeping bags out on the trail leading to the camp showers. The only evidence that their killer left behind was a red flashlight and a bloody footprint. The prime suspect in the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders was Jean Leroy Hart, an escaped convict. Hart had been raised about a mile from Camp Scott, and at the time of the murders, he was at large after escaping from prison, where he had been serving time for burglary, kidnapping, and rape. A local jury acquitted Hart for the crime, citing a lack of evidence. However, the Oklahoma police considered the case solved. To this day, no one knows if Jean Leroy Hart got away with murder or if the true killer was someone else entirely. Either way, the girl's killer never saw justice. The Unicorn Killer. As an adolescent, Ira Einhorn gave himself the nickname of the Unicorn, the English translation of the German surname. The killer was an environmental activist and part of the anti-war movement when he murdered his ex-girlfriend, Holly Maddox. Maddox disappeared in early September 1977 after stopping by Einhorn's Philadelphia apartment to collect her things following their breakup. Several weeks after Maddox's death, police questioned her boyfriend about her whereabouts, to which he stated that she had disappeared on her way to the neighborhood co-op. 18 months later, after neighbors began reporting a rancid smell, police found Maddox's body stuffed in a trunk in Einhorn's closet. Several days before Einhorn was supposed to stand trial, he fled to Europe. As Einhorn had already been arraigned, the court was able to try, convict, and sentence him in absentia. Despite this fact, Einhorn managed to remain in France for 23 years, even getting married while craftily evading extradition. The U.S. government was finally able to bring him back to the States and reconvict him in 2002. Einhorn is now serving a life sentence. They say Sagawa. This cannibal became a local celebrity after signing himself out of a Japanese mental institution in 1986. Asaya Sagawa came from a wealthy family and had exhibited cannibalistic urges from an early age. At 23, he made his first attempt at eating human flesh, breaking into a woman's house to cut off some of her flesh. He was caught and charged with attempted rape. Later, he would move to France to earn his PhD in literature. It would be then, at the age of 32, that Sagawa would kill and eat his classmate, Renee Hartfeld. He admitted to luring the 24-year-old Dutch woman to his apartment under the guise of working on poetry. He said he chose her for her beauty and health, two things he believed he lacked. After shooting her in the neck, he ate various parts of her body over the course of 2 days. He then attempted to dump her body, including 2 suitcases of her dismembered parts, into a lake in the Bois de Boulogne, but was caught in the act. After being held for 2 years in police custody, Sagawa was deemed legally insane in French court and was ordered to be held indefinitely in a mental health institution. After being deported to Japan, he was declared sane by Japanese psychologists and so was able to sign himself out. The Granny Killers. An English-born Australian serial killer, John Wayne Glover, was known for preying on elderly women, including the widow of artist Will Ashton. Over the span of 14 months between 1989 and 1990, Glover murdered 6 elderly women after brutally attacking them. At times, he used simply his fists to attack his victims. With others, he used objects like hammers, his victims' pantyhose, and other instruments. Many of his victims were simply women he saw walking past him on the street, with whom he struck up casual conversation. In addition to attacking and murdering those 6 women, Glover was also accused of molesting and sexually assaulting several other elderly women. At his trial, a psychologist noted that while Glover was sane, he had a severe personality disorder, which may or may not have been connected to his turbulent relationships with his mother and mother-in-law. After being found guilty and sentenced to prison, Glover killed himself in 2005. Days before he died, he handed his last visitor a picture he had drawn, featuring 2 trees and the number 9. Supposedly 9 is the true number of murder Glover was responsible for, not merely the 6 for which he was convicted. The Axemen of New Orleans. This American serial killer was active in the greater New Orleans area between 1918 and 1919. The majority of the murderer's victims were from the Italian immigrant community and were killed with an axe that belonged to them. The killer would access his victims' homes by removing a panel on their back door, then enter and murdered them with either a straight razor or an axe. The brutal serial killer attacked at least 12 people total, most of whom in March 1919. The unidentified killer sent a deranged letter from, quote, hell, where he described himself as, quote, invisible, even as the ether that surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell, end quote. In the letter, the Axeman stated the date and time of his next planned murder and suggested that the only way to stop him was to play jazz music. In response, the entire city filled its buildings and streets with the music sound that night, and no one was murdered. The axe murderer would strike 3 more times before his activity eventually ceased. Today, the story of the Axeman has been repopularized thanks to a similar character in American Horror Story by the name of Coven. The Girl in the Box. 20-year-old Colleen Stan was on her way to a friend's birthday in Northern California when her soon-to-be captor, Cameron Hooker, and his wife, Janice, picked up the hitchhiker. Stan would spend much of the next 7 years trapped in a box that let in no light, sound, or fresh air. Convinced by the Hookers that a mysterious and dangerous organization would kill her and her family if she didn't comply. Under an agreement between Janice and Cameron, and eventually through a forcible signed contract with Stan, the young woman was to be a sex slave for Cameron. When Stan was let out of her box, where she spent up to 23 hours a day eating cold food, scraps, and using a bedpan, she was tortured and raped using various objects. Several years into captivity, the brainwashed Stan was allowed to visit her family once and even got a job. But when Cameron said he wanted Stan to be his second wife, the entire horrifying situation fell apart. Stan eventually got on a bus and fled to her family, while Janice turned her husband in, receiving immunity for her full cooperation. The Eyeball Killer. This Texas murderer and diagnosed psychopath killed at least one woman with 2 more suspected murders to his name. Adopted from an orphanage, Charles Albright was cared for by his very protective adoptive parents. His mother was a school teacher and helped accelerate his learning so far that he entered college in his teens. Despite being so bright, he was also known for partaking in criminal behavior. Arrested first for aggravated assault at the age of 13. His murderous roots, however, lied in a childhood interest. After Albright received a shotgun at a young age, he used it to kill small animals. He would then stuff them with the help of his mother, appeasing his interest in taxidermy. After failing to complete pre-med training at both North Texas University and Arkansas State Teachers College, he would be sent to jail for theft, molestation, and eventually the murder of a sex worker, although police suspected him of at least 3 more slayings. His victims' bodies were left nearly or completely nude out on a city street. They had been shot in the head and their eyes had been removed with surgical-like precision. The Boy in the Box. Since being discovered in 1957, the Boy in the Box case baffled Philadelphia police and the entire city. In the Ivy Hill Cemetery in Cedar Brook, Philadelphia, there is a headstone that reads, America's Unknown Child. It's a permanent reminder of the child who lies beneath it, a boy who was found beaten to death in a box some 65 years ago. Since then, he's been called the boy in the box. On February 23, 1957, a student at LaSalle College noticed the boy in the box for the first time. The student was in the area hoping to catch a glimpse of the girls enrolled at Sisters of Good Shepherd, a home for wayward youths. Instead, he noticed a boy in the underbrush. Though he saw the boy's head, the student mistook it for a doll and went on his way. When he heard about a missing girl from New Jersey, he returned to the scene on February 25th, found the body, and called the police. The police responding to the scene found the body of a boy between the ages of 4 and 6 years old in a JCPenney box that had once contained a bassinet. He was naked and wrapped in a flannel blanket, and investigators determined that he was malnourished and had been beaten to death. It's something you don't forget. This is one that bothered everybody. Then the race to identify the boy in the box began. 40 years later, in 2002, a woman identified as only M told investigators that the boy had been purchased by her abusive mother from another family in 1954. According to M, she claimed his name was Jonathan and that he had been physically and sexually abused by her mother after he vomited up baked beans one night. Thus, the decades passed, and the boy in the box remained unknown. But all that changed on December 2022, when investigators in Philadelphia announced that through DNA testing of the day, were able to finally give him a name. Joseph Augustus Zarelli, the boy in the box.
You got all that emotion that's heaving like an ocean, and you're drowning in a deep, dark well. I can hear it in your voice that if you only had a choice, you would rather be anyone else. I love you just the way that you are. I love the way you made your precious heart. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. I know it's hard to hear it when that anger in your spirit is pointed like an arrow at your chest. When the voices in your mind are anything but kind, and you can't believe your father knows best. I love you just the way that you are. I love the way he's shaping your heart. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Well, how does it end when the war that you're in is just you against you against you? You gotta learn to love, learn to love, learn to love your enemies too. You can't expect to be perfect, it's a fight you gotta forfeit. You belong to me, whatever you do. So lay down your weapon, darling, take a deep breath and believe that I love you. kind to yourself.